What's good, YouTube? Justin Righteous here, back with another reaction video. I like to yap on world topics, but I don't just yap. I dissect, I break down the content, I share lessons from my own experiences, and I call out the misinformation. Okay, so today we have why intellectuals are fucking idiots. I consider myself an intellectual. You know?
Caller.
Who is that? Okay, anyways, I'm sorry, guys. I consider myself an intellectual. And I'm someone, I like to read, I like to absorb information, I like to learn about the world, how it functions. I like to learn about humans, how they function. Why is it that sometimes we do things without even like realizing, you know what I mean? Like, I study physics, which is a very niche thing it's very esoteric, you know. So, but there was a very large portion of my life where I asked myself, like, why is it that I'm so smart? Because I always got good grades at school. You know, I asked myself, why is it that I'm so smart, but I ain't rich? Or why is it that I'm so smart, but like I failed at like many things? And I used to think that was a huge paradox. But eventually, very recently, maybe like 2 years ago, I don't know, even more recent than that, about a year ago, I realized why. Okay. And I think the action is because we just drown in overthinking. We just get paralyzed by, we get analysis paralysis. We just think. We try to prepare, and never actually take action. And I think a lot of people suffer with this. So let's get straight into the video, man.
December 19th, 1978, Malcolm Caldwell, a professor at the University of London, boards a plane to Cambodia for a historic trip. It's an opportunity so rare that Caldwell and his friends hoped that it could potentially change the world forever. 3 days later, Caldwell would die in one of the dumbest ways imaginable. And this is why intellectuals are fucking idiots. Malcolm Caldwell was a consummate intellectual. And as we'll see, he was also a complete and total idiot.
What is a consummate?
He spent his entire...
What is a consummate intellectual? See, I'm an intellectual. I like to know everything, man. Consummate, complete by having sexual intercourse, showing a high degree of skill and flair, complete or perfect.
Your life studying Southeast Asian history and economic.
By the way, I don't think I'm perfect.
As a result,
I don't think I'm perfect in any means. I consider myself an intellectual. I think I'm smart. But I don't think I'm perfect. There's so many things that I can't do that I low-key wish I could do. There's, you know, I see people online every single day that I kind of wish I could, you know, do what they're doing. You know, I'm not saying I'm perfect in any way, shape, or form. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. I've made a boatload of mistakes in my life. You know, those that know me personally know that I've been through a lot of things, you know, caused by my own decisions. But I always knew that, like, you know, I'm the master of my own fate. So I'm a probabilities guy, man. I tell myself if there's a low chance of there being terrible consequences, then I'll probably take the risk.
Caldwell became a staunch Marxist. Just to give you an idea, Caldwell visited North Korea in the 1960s, and he came away saying good things about it. So when communist revolutionaries took control of Cambodia in 1974, Caldwell was enthusiastic. The new communist leader of Cambodia was a man by the name of Pol Pot, and he has a radical new agenda of how to create a communist utopia. Caldwell believes that Pol Pot could finally be the communist leader that he's been waiting for. But the truth is that Pol Pot is as insane as he is cruel. And at the time, this is obvious to pretty much anyone paying attention. In the 4 years Pol Pot is in power, it's estimated that he is responsible for the death of more than 20% of the entire population. But when this news of genocide and atrocities began to leak out to the wider world, Caldwell refuses to believe it. This unwavering support eventually earns him.
Sorry, my mom is calling me, man. I'm actually gonna answer.
The regime. He accepts.
Hello, mommy. No. Okay. Have a good day. Oh, okay. Drive safe. Goodbye. Sorry, my bad, y'all. You know, I just told myself I'll just do it. I'll just do it on the video, and you know, y'all can see every Side of me, man.
In December of 1978, he boards that fateful plane to Asia. Caldwell spends a few days touring the country. On the last day, he is granted an audience with Pol Pot himself. Now, reportedly, Caldwell was euphoric with excitement and anticipation. Once in private, Caldwell and Pol Pot had a long intellectual conversation.
Oh boy. As told by shitty AI.
In his enthusiasm, Caldwell began sharing some of his ideas for Cambodia. And at some point, he likely said something that Pol Pot took to be criticism. Because, well, soon after the...
By the way, this is one of the 48 laws of power, okay? It's never criticize your master, something like that. Know your master. Never outshine the master, okay? Because the master has a lot of ego. If there's someone above you that has more power than you and controls your fate, bro, do not outshine him, because he's going to delete you very fast. He sees you as a threat to his position.
Conversation ended, Pol Pot had Caldwell killed.
And look at that. Killed his ass.
Now, Malcolm Caldwell is what I like to refer to as an intelligent idiot, a man with an encyclopedic breadth of knowledge and understanding, yet absolutely no idea how to use
You have to
any
understand
of it.
people.
And that's what this video is about, intelligent idiots. Because today's world seems to be full of them, and it's, well, it's becoming a problem. Take the recent study that asked 30 behavioral scientists to predict which interventions would motivate people to go to the gym more often. Not only were these scientists' predictions horribly wrong, but get this, they were worse than random guesses of a person off the street. Or consider the fact that over 91% of fund managers cannot beat the market, despite the fact that the entire purpose of a hedge fund is to explicitly create better returns than the market. Or an ongoing 20-year study that has consistently found that 90% of professional wine tasters are no better in blind taste tests than random chance at identifying more expensive wine. What the hell is going on here? Well, to explain, we need to start in a very strange place. A president, a CEO, and a horribly unsuccessful war. March 28th, 1961, the newly elected president, John F. Kennedy, appoints the CEO of Ford Motors, Robert McNamara, to become his Secretary of Defense.
Oh, really?
This is a seismic decision, as McNamara is a completely unconventional choice. A CEO from the private sector with no military background, no Washington connections, a total outsider, and, to boot, the youngest Secretary of Defense in US history. McNamara is also an intellectual. He's a statistician. He's a lover of data and predictive models. And upon confirmation, McNamara's big innovation
is like Elon Musk and Donald Trump today.
Quantitative analysis of manufacturing to the actual battlefield. The US military is about to get a serious upgrade in efficiency. Now, a few years later, the US enters the Vietnam War, partly on the basis of McNamara's confidence of his own ability to use data analytics to read the battlefield. He decides to measure everything: armaments, troop counts, casualties, supply chains, and make sure that every decision is based solely on the facts on the ground. And once in the war,
I'm a numbers guy, so I don't blame him. I'm a numbers guy, but I guess in this context, it did not work. You know, I like intelligence. I like to know about the battlefield. You know, when I use players in video games like Apex, I like a Bloodhound, the one that scans the battlefield to see where the players are. When I play Call of Duty, I use UAV. You know what I mean? Valkyrie in Apex Legends. You just fly up. You can see if there's enemies near. I'm a huge intel guy.
His data analysis consistently shows.
But I also think speed kills.
The U.S. is winning
fast,
easily, handily.
You know,
year after
fast.
year. They are committing fewer resources, fewer troops, sustaining fewer casualties, and controlling more land than the enemy. Military victory,
so it was working.
Promises, is right around the corner. Or at least, that's what the intellectuals claimed. But the years go on, and the victory never comes. Because here's what McNamara's data doesn't measure: the North Vietnamese willingness to suffer and die for their country, the poor morale of the US troops, the corruption of the South Vietnamese government, the shifting political winds at home. The truth is, the US is losing and has been losing for almost the entire war. And everyone kind of knows it, except McNamara. Intellectuals create models of the world. That's kind of their purpose. That's what makes them intellectuals. In theory, these models reflect and measure reality in a way that allows us to quantify progress and predict the future. The problem is you can't measure everything. It's impossible. And if it turns out that the immeasurable factors are actually more important than what's measurable, well, then like McNamara, you're kind of screwed. But here's another major issue: getting accurate data in the first place. On the surface, data seems really straightforward. You just go out and measure whatever you need to measure.
I think that's why like people often get stuck in analysis paralysis, is because the things that we can't measure are actually like what will lead to the success. And that's what stops people from like doing things. So it's like someone not like too scared to get into social media because he doesn't know how the audience is going to react. He doesn't know how his friends are going to react, how the people he knows are going to react. So you just don't do it because you're scared. You're scared. You think it's going to be bad. And that's why you just got to take the leap and then go in. And what's the worst that could happen? What's the worst that could happen? Your ego gets hit a little bit, and that's good, because your ego has to die for you to be very successful in life.
But what if the way you choose to measure something actually changes the results? For example, there's a popular concept in health and nutrition world known as blue zones. You've probably heard of them.
So explain the blue zones.
Places around the world
where people live
that people live long lives.
Is there anything scientifically different about these blue zones?
A lot of the blue zones eat lemons. We can blue zone our own house if we want to.
Blue zones are communities around the world that produce a higher amount of 100-year-olds. People have suggested that we should study these blue zones to figure out how they live longer. And as a result, the blue zone model of health has become incredibly popular over the past 20 years, spawning best-selling books, a multi-million-dollar business, and a Netflix documentary, not to mention hundreds of YouTube videos.
Here's to the beginning of our blue zone adventure.
And this is great. Except it wasn't. See, it turns out that upon closer inspection, a lot of the data behind the blue zones is, well, bad. For example, each of the blue zones happen to be in places where birth certificates were either adopted oddly late or were largely destroyed in a war. All of the blue zones involved countries that were at war in the mid-20th century and had drafts with upper age limits, giving young people incentives to lie about their age. 2 of the 5 blue zones had major pension law changes that gave older people more money, another incentive to lie about one's age. And most interestingly, while the blue zones are overrepresented in 100-year-olds, they are underrepresented in 90-year-olds. Interesting. The point here is that the blue zone model of health and longevity isn't necessarily a bad model. The problem is that it's built on top of bad data. Therefore, it's not accurately reflecting reality. Yet, of course, nobody thinks about that. Netflix definitely didn't. But here's the real problem. Intellectuals forget that models are just models. Instead, they come to believe that their models are reality, and the consequences can be disastrous. Malcolm Caldwell spent 20 years studying Southeast Asian history and development. He created a model of understanding that part of the world that was largely Marxist. Then, when he actually went to Southeast Asia and met an actual Marxist and tried to tell that Marxist all about his model, it didn't end so well. When an intellectual model and reality collide, reality always wins. Yet, when their models are contradicted by reality, most intellectuals do not side with reality. On the contrary, most intellectuals will double down on their models, and this is what makes them idiots. By the way, do you want to avoid being an idiot? Of course you do.
What is he about to say?
This video is brought to you by Shortform, the book summary app that helps you seem way smarter than you actually are. Some way. In fact, becoming reading
It's not bad.
to get
It's kinda cool.
everybody fucks that up. App, everything.
Models versus reality. Let's go. Let's see how to,
In 1968, the biologist Paul Ehrlich began his book,
Get
The
into
Population
reality.
Bomb, with the following sentence. The battle to feed all of humanity is over. In the 1970s, hundreds of
By the way, this is like I don't say this often to people because people never really ask me why I study physics, But the reason one of the biggest reasons why I'm studying physics is to understand reality in a scientific perspective, understand physical reality, because there's very different meanings to reality or aspects to reality, like the social reality, the social side, the psychological side, the economic side, and like things like that. But I chose physics because I'm a very scientific guy and I love video games. So, I figured that physics will really give me a good understanding of reality, a fundamental understanding, and it's gonna allow me to. I'm not gonna say too much.
Millions of people will starve to death. At this late date, nothing can prevent a substantial increase in the world death rate. In the book, Ehrlich builds a case that the world is overpopulated and we would soon experience catastrophic social, economic, and environmental collapse. He predicted that all marine life would die by 1980, that over 1 billion people would die due to famine by 1990, and that England would no longer exist by the year 2000.
We're very close to a worldwide plague that could kill virtually everybody.
The book was
Jesus
a
Christ.
massive hit, and it inspired political and social movements across the world.
But that's good though. Like, I think it's good to prevent, like, because when you do things like that, when you like install that type of fear a little bit, where like, guys, look, this is what it's gonna happen if we continue this way, then that pushes people to make changes, to make more healthier changes, and to change their ways and to prevent it. It encourages people to prevent those, even though it might not happen. Well, you never know at the end of the day.
There's too many people, and we'd like to see people have fewer children and better ones.
Ehrlich became an internationally celebrated thought leader and luminary.
Have to get the death rate and birth rate in balance, and there's only 2 ways to do it. One is to bring the birth rate down, the other is to push the death rate up.
He was featured in newspapers and
God.
appeared on television all over the world. He was achieving what every intellectual hopes to achieve: real impact.
You could argue that that's
Except
true
that
today.
he was completely and utterly wrong about everything. But Ehrlich didn't let that stop him. In 1990, he doubled down with another book. In 2004, he stated in an interview that his only mistake in his first book was that his predictions were too optimistic. In 2008, he argued that governments should not allow people to have more than 2 children. Even last year, in 2024, he was interviewed on 60 Minutes, one of the most prestigious news programs in the United States. Ehrlich is the poster child for an intellectual idiot. Here you have a guy, super educated, professor at Stanford, spends decades thinking about sustainability, and he comes up with a model. The model makes some catastrophic predictions. He is then rewarded for the model. He's told he's a genius, he's a visionary. Oh my God, he's saving the planet and humanity and the baby seals. Oh my God, the baby seals. He gets paid for this model. He wins awards for this model. He becomes world famous for this model. But reality eventually makes a fool of every model. And the intellectuals who cling to their models.
By the way, that is the most important factor of science, is that it's falsifiable. That is the most important factor, thing of every theory. A theory has to be falsifiable for it to, for us to implement it, for it to be true. Okay? That literally means that eventually it's going to be wrong. That one day is going to be wrong. Your model is going to be wrong. Because the world is always changing. The world is dynamic.
In the face of reality, become idiots. Idiots don't update their views about the world when new information comes out. Idiots try to shut down discourse rather than engage with it.
Exactly.
Idiots will look at something plain and obvious and claim that it's actually really complicated, you see? Because if you factor the binomial of the quantum rate of the social construct and divide by 0, you'll discover, just like Plato once said, that what is right if only what is right is left, and what's left is alleviates the burden of the proletariat to the liberation of all peoples, even under God, whatever and ever. Amen. Look, the world is a scary and unpredictable place. It is human nature to crave some model to give it some sense of predictability. But the real problem is that our models of reality also give us an identity and a sense of belonging. I mean, look at these fucking nitwits. Do you think this is really about climate change? No, these are empty, angry human beings, desperate for their lives to mean something in the face of the void. And their apocalyptic climate change model has done that for them. But we all have to be careful, because the fact that our models give our lives a sense of meaning means that all of us are susceptible to becoming idiots if we're not careful. And this is how we prevent that.
He always gives us solutions in his videos. I like that.
You get a lot of information from the internet. That's great because you can be conscious of what you're consuming and choose whether to learn more about a topic or not. But the fact that you are choosing which models to adopt and believe in for yourself means that you are an intellectual now. And as an intellectual, you are never far from turning into an idiot. All this alternative media, if I can call it that, has a kind of paradox to it. On the one hand, it is great at exposing the disconnect between the intellectual elite and the actual on-the-ground reality of millions of people. Idiots like Malcolm Caldwell can now be spotted a mile away on Twitter before they even have a chance to get shot in the face by a communist. But there is something more subtle happening as well, and it concerns me deeply. On the internet, the models of the world that travel the furthest are not the most accurate, but the most attention-grabbing.
Become less intelligent.
Woke has one purpose.
So much misinformation right now.
They are the models that appeal most strongly to our base instincts, prejudices,
Danger.
emotional needs. And by and large, these attention-grabbing models of the world are inaccurate at best and actively destructive at worst. And because we're spending more time on our devices, removed from the real world, we are less likely to suffer the consequences that a faulty model will give us.
By doing what the world has told them to do.
Put another way, the less time we spend in the real world, the less of a cost we experience for being detached from it. And you and I and everyone must go through pains to remember this all the time. This is not reality. This is a cheap 2D rendition of reality, a funhouse mirror of reality. It is a cheap imitation and temporary
A highly edited and changed and, different version of reality.
substitute for reality. So what does that mean? That means less time on this stupid device and more time out in the world. That means meet more people face to face, talk to them, connect with them, disagree with them, care about them. The more emotionally satiated you are with the relationships in your life, the less you will need to rely on some bullshit intellectual model to emotionally satisfy you. And then, with the emotional sustenance of real-world relationships supporting you, approach the models of the world with a healthy dose of skepticism. All models are wrong, but some can be useful. If a model is useful, use it. But the moment it's not, abandon it and move on.
Great video, guy. Great video, Mark Manson. He's a very famous author, by the way. Thank you for watching. That's a really good lesson that he talks about, just get in the world and interact with other people, because other people are the most, they're the best representative of reality. You could go outside and not see anyone. You're gonna see reality, but not really. It's when you start talking to other people, when you start seeing, you start hearing their own experiences, their own ideas, their own opinions about things. You're like, okay, you're going to relate, but you're also going to be like, damn, I have a lot to learn. Like, I haven't seen anything, and some people are going to disagree with you, because if you don't share opinions with other people, you're always going to think you're right until someone disagrees with you. Then you're going to realize, okay, maybe I wasn't right this whole time, So go outside in the world, man. I'm a homebody. I'm fairly introverted, so I'm not gonna force you to go outside and talk to people. But I still do that. It's still good. It's very good for you. That's it for the video. I'll catch you guys in the next one.